Welcome to Cat Has Questions, curiosity, stories, and the strange corners of everyday life. Hello, I'm your host, Kat, and this is Cat Has Questions. There are some mysteries that feel dramatic right away. Disappearances, crimes, strange sightings in the sky. They announce themselves. You know you're looking at something unusual. But then there are quieter mysteries. The kind that don't demand your attention at first. The kind you almost talk yourself out of noticing. The kind that start so small, and you wonder if they're even real at all. Imagine lying in your bed in the middle of the night. Your house is still, the air is still. Everything around you feels exactly how it should. Normal. But there's a sound. Not loud enough to startle you, not sharp enough to identify, just low enough that it feels like it's sitting underneath everything else. A hum. Steady, constant, like an engine idling somewhere just out of reach. At first you ignore it, because that's what you do with background noise, but it doesn't go away. So you get up, you check the window, you walk outside, you stand there listening. Nothing. No cars, no machinery, no obvious sources. And then you go back inside, and it's still there. And the strangest part? Your partner's standing right next to you and hears absolutely nothing. So now you're left with a different question. Not, what is that sound? But why am I the only one hearing it? For decades, people in one small town in New Mexico have sworn this exact thing was happening to them. Some say it drove them to exhaustion. Some say it felt less like a sound and more like a pressure. Something you could almost feel in your body. And when scientists came to figure out what was causing it, they didn't uncover a hidden machine, they didn't isolate a frequency, they didn't solve it. They left with almost nothing. Just a conclusion that somehow made it worse. There might not be an answer. Today we're talking about the Taos Hum. Taos, New Mexico is the kind of place people go looking for peace. Not just quiet, but intentional quiet. It sits in northern New Mexico, surrounded by desert and mountains, wide open space, dry air, and a kind of stillness that feels deliberate. It's known for its art, its spiritual pull, the way people describe feeling drawn there. The kind of place where silence isn't just expected, it's part of the appeal. People go to Taos to slow down, to unplug, to feel grounded. So, when a few residents started mentioning a strange, low humming sound in the early 1990s, the assumption was simple. It had to be something ordinary. Because what else would it be? Maybe traffic carrying farther than expected in the desert air. Maybe a generator, power lines, heating systems. Something distant. Something mechanical, or at least something explainable. And honestly, that assumption makes sense. Because when something disrupts an otherwise quiet environment, your brain looks for the nearest logical answer. It fills in the gap. It says there has to be a source. That explanation held for a while. Then, in March of 1992, a local woman named Katanya Salzman decided she'd had enough. She wrote a letter to the Taos News, and it was a complaint, a very specific one. She described a low, relentless sound that was interrupting her sleep and slowly affecting her life. This wasn't curiosity, it was disruption. She and her husband had moved to Taos expecting peace, and that was the point, like I said. And instead, she was hearing something that never seemed to fully stop. And here's where things shift. Because one person hearing something strange, that can be dismissed. Misinterpretation, sensitivity, something internal. But once her letter was published, people started responding. Quietly at first, and then all at once. Residents who had stayed silent, who maybe assumed it was just them, started coming forward, saying, I hear it too. And now everything changes because this isn't isolated anymore. It's shared. It's not a ringing and not a whistle. It's a low-frequency hum. Some compared it to a truck idling in the distance. Others described it as something pressing into the walls or sitting in the air, or vibrating just below what should be audible. And even that is interesting, because the descriptions aren't identical, but they're close enough to feel connected, which raises a question. If this is internal, why are so many people describing something so similar? And if it's external, why can't everyone hear it? I have to say, too, this is also super interesting to me as an audiologist because tinnitus is something we deal with on a daily basis, multiple times a day on a daily basis. And I'll kind of get into what tinnitus is later if you don't know what that is. But basically, I feel like this is super interesting that it's like a whole city of people who can hear this. At this point, you would expect the mystery to narrow because now there's enough consistency to investigate, enough reports, enough disruption, enough concern. And eventually complaints reached New Mexico Congressman Bill Richardson, which means this wasn't just a local curiosity anymore. It had escalated. His office assembled a team of scientists and engineers, not just one group, but multiple agencies. People from Los Alamos National Laboratory, Sandia National Laboratories, Phillips Air Force Laboratory, and the University of New Mexico. This was serious. They approached it like a real, measurable problem, something that should leave evidence. They tested for acoustic signals, seismic vibrations, and electromagnetic energy. They used highly sensitive equipment, geophones, recording devices, the kind of tools designed to pick up things most people would never notice. And for a moment, it seemed like they might find something, because their instruments did pick something up at first. And at first it wasn't a hum, but it was a gopher. One report noted they detected the sound of a gopher tunneling underground, which almost sounds absurd, but it actually proves something important. Their equipment worked. It was sensitive and it was capable, and it could detect subtle physical movements beneath the ground. So if there was an external source, they should have found it. But they didn't. Nothing. Because now you have a group of people reporting a consistent experience and a scientific investigation that can't verify it. So which one do you trust? The data or the people? Because the investigation ended with a statement that doesn't resolve anything. It just reframes the problem. We are left with a mystery. Some things that they were able to confirm about it, though, is that the Taos Hum is a low-frequency, persistent drone typically reported in the ranges of 32 hertz to 80 hertz. So that's like a very, very deep tone. It is often described as sounding like a distant diesel engine pulsating between 0.5 and 2000 hertz, and is more noticeable, interestingly, indoors and at night. There are some reports suggesting a concentration of energy between 55 and 60 hertz, which is on the higher end of that very low frequency range. The characteristics that people often describe: low-pitched, often inaudible to most people, so only about 2% of the population in the area can hear it. And despite investigations by all these agencies, no definitive source has been identified. And those who hear it often report it as a pulsating, irritating noise that can cause headaches or stress. A 1973 report cites a university study of 50 cases of people complaining about a low throbbing background noise that others were unable to hear. The sound always peaked between 30 and 40 hertz and was found to only be heard during cool weather with a light breeze and often early in the morning. And these noises were often confined to about a 6-mile wide area or 10 kilometers. For some who are capable of hearing it, the hum can be a disturbing phenomenon. And it's actually been linked to 3 suicides in the United Kingdom. So Taos is not the only city that has had this occur, this odd phenomenon, but I would say it's probably one of the most prominent and famous ones, at least in the United States. So that 1973 British study that I was just talking about, it was basically showing that hearers of this sound can move away from it. So one person for the Taos Hum, the one we're talking about in New Mexico, reported the range was about 30 miles around. And there's approximately an equal percentage of male and female hearers, and age does appear to be a factor, with middle-aged people more likely to hear it. I'm going to tell you about a few other ones that are famous. So, Auckland, New Zealand, in 2006, so this is a little bit more recently, a man named Tom Moore at Massey University made several recordings that appeared to be the Auckland hum. And his previous research simulated that the hum was about 56 hertz. So all of these are still within that 36 to 80 hertz range. And then there was the Windsor hum in Ontario, which was 2011, so even more recent. This one, though, was estimated to be emanating from Zug Island, which is a heavily industrialized section in the north bank of the Detroit River. Canadian officials requested U.S. assistance in determining the source, but local authorities would not let these other entities enter this island. It was possible that a steel mill operating in the U.S. was the potential cause, but officials stated that no new equipment had been installed or activated around the time that the noise became noticeable. But when the blast furnaces were deactivated in April of 2020, the noises went away as well. So it's very likely that it was from that, if when they stopped those machines, that sound stopped. So other places in 2021, there's been hums reported in Frankfurt, in Darmstadt in Germany, but those were identified as more like machinery, like air conditioner units, faulty heat pumps, that sort of thing. 2022, there were hums reported in St. Louis County, Missouri. 2023, there was some in Northern Ireland. And even as recent as November of 2025, citizens of Whitehorse, Yukon, Canada, reported a low mechanical humming noise. So, as I've mentioned, there is still no known cause for the Taos Hum specifically, but I'm going to talk about some possible explanations. So, the first being high-pressure gas pipelines. Industrial facilities mechanical engineer Steve Kohlhaas spent $30,000 on legal fees and equipment related to his independent investigation of this hum. There is a 2019 documentary film called Doom Vibrations, focused on his 10-year journey to figure out what was causing the noise and his theory behind it. In all reported cases that he studied, he said that the locations were along high-pressure gas pipelines or at least in close proximity to them. In 2009, the head of audiology, at Addenbrooke's Hospital in Cambridge, David Bagley, said he believed people's problem with the hum were based on the physical world about 1/3 of the time and stemmed from people focusing too keenly on innocuous background sounds the other 2/3 of the time. Bagley said, for example, the noise can be attributed to environmental causes, such as industrial machinery at a nearby factory or an industrial fan. But he also found that the majority of cases remain unexplained. Bagley said, I think most people view the hum as a fringe belief because it's so subjective. People say they hear something that most people can't hear. But when you look at the vast number of people who say they can hear it, it's obvious that there's something going on. Bagley also theorizes that people's hearing has become overly sensitive. My thought too is, I wonder if it is some sort of external source, but that's a very low frequency. I'm guessing not everyone can hear that low of a frequency. So my theory is people can hear it when they have really good hearing in the low frequencies. And obviously everyone's hearing is different. So I wonder if only whatever it was, 20% of the population has hearing that is that low, if that makes sense. Another theory is mechanical devices. So although some form of mechanical source is an obvious candidate, given the common description of the hum as sounding like a diesel engine, the majority of reported hums have not been traced to a specific mechanical source. However, there's been a lot of, obviously, them trying to figure out where the source is coming from, and even after turning certain things off, the reports of the hum still persisted. There have been 3 hums, though, that have been linked to mechanical sources: the West Seattle hum, the Wellington hum, and like I said, the Windsor, Ontario one was thought to be from a steelworks place. There was one hum in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, that was suspected to have originated from a substation about 2 miles away from the home of a couple who first reported it. This substation is home to the state's largest transformer, and actually one couple sued the power company for the disruption the hum was causing them. The hum was louder inside their house than out, in part, they believed, because their house vibrated in resonance to the 60 hertz hum. In the lawsuit, they claimed the volume of the hum was measured at up to 64 decibels in their home. Keep in mind, 64 decibels is how loud I'm talking right now. It's a little bit louder than a normal conversational speech. So just imagine having a hum that loud in your house all the time. I think that would drive you crazy. Some researchers speculate that the very low frequency radio waves that could be used by military systems or aircrafts talking with submarines could also be a source of the hum. And then I'm going to talk about tinnitus. So I know I mentioned that I would talk about this. So a suggested diagnosis of tinnitus, which is basically a self-reported disturbance of the auditory system, is used by some physicians in response to complaints about the hum. So tinnitus is generated internally by your auditory and nervous system with no external stimulus. So a lot of people will report a high-pitched ringing when they have hearing loss. There are other causes for tinnitus besides hearing loss, but one of the main ones is hearing loss. But what that is basically is that people will hear an ongoing hum, static noise, high-pitched ringing. It can sound like a lot of different things for different people, but basically it's internal. It's in your head that your brain kind of creates this sound. And the main reason people have this when they have hearing loss is that the main theory right now is that your brain kind of creates sound in the frequencies where you're missing auditory stimulation. So, and a lot of people with hearing loss have this. Like I said, I see people every day, multiple people a day with tinnitus. This theory, the hum is hypothesized to be some form of low-frequency tinnitus. The hard part about this is some report it to be worse inside their house versus outside. Some people say it's equally bad indoors and outdoors. Some people only notice the hum in their home. But it's also important to note that people with tinnitus, it's much more noticeable when you're in quiet. So could it be louder when you're in your house because there's less like environmental noise around you? Some sufferers report that it made it worse by soundproofing their house, which would decrease the environmental noise, thus making the hum and or tinnitus more apparent. My guess is some of these people reporting they have it in Taos have tinnitus, but I also bet there's actually some sort of external hum if they've been able to measure it. So I'm guessing some of the reports are from people who do have tinnitus, and then some of them are from people hearing this low frequency sound. Another thing in my wheelhouse is, in another theory, is spontaneous otoacoustic emissions. So basically the human ears generate their own noise called spontaneous otoacoustic emissions, or OAEs. Various studies have shown that 38 to 60% of adults with normal hearing have these otoacoustic emissions, although the majority are unaware of these sounds. The people who do hear these sounds typically hear a faint hissing or buzzing, especially if they are otherwise in complete silence. So basically, everyone's ears, when the sound goes into your ear, your hair cells create this response to it. Most people can't hear that response. It's just like a mechanical acoustic phenomenon happening within your body. But this is saying some people wonder if the Taos hum could be considered an otoacoustic emission as a possibility. I promise I'm almost done with my theories here. The next theory being a jet stream. So Philip Dickinson suggested at the Institute of Biology conference in 1973 that the 30 to 40 hertz hum could be a result of the jet stream shearing against slower moving air and possibly being amplified by power line posts. But other people in like acoustic groups have dismissed this suggestion as absolute nonsense. And then finally, the last theory are animals. So one of the many possible causes of the West Seattle hum was considered that it could be related to a fish called the midshipman fish, also known as the toadfish. A hum previously reported in California was traced to the mating call of this male midshipman fish. However, in that case, the hum was resonating through houseboat hulls and affecting the people living on the boat. Researchers at the University of Washington did determine that it would be impossible for any resonating hum transmitted from like a boat or a lake to transmit that far inland, certainly not far enough to account for the reports of a 30-mile radius, that sort of thing. But then also the Scottish Association of Marine Science hypothesized that the nocturnal humming sound heard in Hythe, Hampshire, could be produced by a similar, quote, sonic fish. The council believed it to be unlikely, since they're not really commonly found inshore in the waters of the UK. As of February of 2014, although the sound source had not been located, the Hythe hum had been recorded. So, as you can see, there's a lot of different phenomenons like this going on, and I think in varying cases it's different things, but for Taos, they have not determined what that is. So, what is treatment options for people who can hear this Taos hum, who are really bothered by it, aside from moving out of that 30-mile radius? David Bagley's research focused on using psychology and relaxation techniques to minimize distress due to the hum, which can lead to a quieting or even removal of the noise. Geoff Leventhal, a noise and vibration expert, suggested cognitive behavioral therapy can be effective in helping those affected. It's a question of whether you tense up to the noise or are relaxed by it. Cognitive behavioral therapy was shown to work by helping people take a different attitude towards it. And actually, cognitive behavioral therapy is one of the things we also recommend for people with tinnitus, so these kind of go hand in hand. If it's something really bothersome, it trains you to focus on the tinnitus in a different way and kind of not focusing on it at all if you can, because the less you focus on it, the less you're going to notice it. I didn't know I was going to be able to give you guys like a little audiology lecture today. That's kind of fun. So as I mentioned, only a small percentage of the population reports hearing it, roughly 2%, which really complicates things even more. Because if it's real, why doesn't everyone hear it? And if it's internal, why does it feel shared? And maybe the Taos Hum is environmental. Maybe it's a sensory phenomenon science just doesn't fully understand yet. Maybe it's both, which I think it's both. But what makes this story linger isn't just that there was a strange sound. It's what happened when people tried to prove it. Because for the people hearing it, the hum was never abstract. It wasn't theoretical, it was real. It was sleep lost, nights interrupted, the slow build of something you can't turn off and can't explain. Some mysteries are unsettling because of what we know. The Taos Hum is unsettling because of what we can't confirm. Because maybe the most uncomfortable possibility is that something can exist right in front of us, quiet, constant, persistent, and still leave no trace behind. And if you're hearing something tonight, something you can't quite place, you might want to ask yourself one question. Is it really there? Or are you just the only one who can hear it? Stay curious. Thanks for listening to Cat Has Questions. If you liked this episode, follow the show and share it with someone who loves a good spiral. See you next week.